make a little, like, you know, little spike. On down. Did a very similar approach when we had like the Fang version. It's got like its own kind of tooth that hangs down in that area, and then I can get in here and I can look at, okay, well, I tapered this over here, so that's okay. But what's my taper here? It's at 3.9, so let's bring it down to 3. Let's bring that up.
It's interesting. None of this is very complicated illustration.
But if I'm
in Illustrator,
that means I'm going to need to.
You have to start with an idea. Is this like his? Are these like his NFT? It's like an NFT project he's doing.
And now I'm thinking, you know what I wish? I probably need to make sure it's more obvious that this is kind of going up there. And I totally agree. Oh my goodness. Yes, I wish Figma had tapering so bad. I would absolutely adore using Figma to just illustrate everything. That would
but that's not what
so
Figma's
awesome.
for.
The reason why is because I use Figma for actually setting up all these components in our system in order to start building these grims and building these demons, and it would be fantastic if I could do it all natively in there. Oh, I agree. That would be huge. Absolutely would love that.
So you just create symbols.
And I'm thinking, ooh, you know, it could be cool.
All these components.
What if, like, the way that this mouth comes in, what if this, like, kind of folds in a little bit? And so, like, it kind of creates this, like, okay, that's not a good version of it. That just looks like weird flaps. But there is going to be a cool version of it that we can do. Listen, I feel the same way. I think it was harder to like want to quit Illustrator. I will just say, like, I think my issue is like nothing is ever updated in Illustrator. So I'm just like constantly like struggling against a platform that just feels like it's been like deprecated in all ways except for like their outward language about it. And that has become so frustrating to use software that it does feel like I don't know, the features they're adding are not for me, and that's frustrating to me because then I'm always left like trying to figure out how to do even the most basic things. I'm like, oh, cool. Here's a new
what features do you want?
Now has that it didn't have before. That's cool. And yeah, maybe connecting that is going to be really cool. All right. There's still a lot of work to do on this one. We still got to get like the head as it kind of explodes out and does some really interesting things. So we're not just because I do it, but because the people in the community are fabulous. And I have not seen a community that works quite like this one, with the amount of people that are active in sharing, making
what is he talking about?
Corner right here, and that joint just doesn't feel very natural. We've got kind of this like bowed out look to it. Now you can go in here if you need like a full fill, connect these pieces. You could put these in a group like this, go into isolation mode. Now I've just got these. Put these together like this. Maybe make this dark, and then you can always combine these two shapes like that.
Also use the line tool.
There you go. You got yourself a ring. But this is sort of the method that I use when I want to make sure that that band that ties around it actually comes out a little bit, so you could feel like it's a little bit of a circle. And then usually, you know, this is a cool time too to start thinking about, okay, well, how should lighting work when you have an object like this? So I'm going to go ahead and separate this. Tucking it behind here. And then a cool thing you can do is, like, if you duplicate this and then you just kind of like pull it in, readjust this, knock this out of that shape, you can start doing all kinds of cool lighting with it too, where it's like, oh cool, like that's sort of, you know, where it gets a little darker. And then of course I'm a big fan of doing highlights, so you could just bring this in a little bit like that, push this down a little bit, take these, even make them
Edge.
brighter.
Think about highlights, edge lights. Yep, there's the edge lights.
Like highlight on the outside. Maybe there's, you know, a little light right here. That's another highlight that you've got. And now you can start kind of messing with how all these shapes kind of sit. I hope that's helpful. Next Coast, that's for you. Let me know if there's anything else I can explain as I kind of make these. It's probably a little more manual than maybe you thought it would be, but that's the best way that I've seen to do that kind of stuff. Awesome. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for hanging out and for talking. Thanks for being active in the chat. And if you're in the Grim Syndicate,
I gotta figure out how to up my content. Probably stream earlier in the day. This is a little late. This is probably late in the night, in the morning. All right, well, I'll work on that later. Just gotta start off somewhere, huh? That's right. All right, let's get back to it. So I think I'm pretty close to wrapping this guy up. I had to go in and make the horns a little more complex. Did that. I'm adding some edge lighting, as you just saw in that video, or the previous video, Justin Mezzel's video. A great illustrator, great designer. I can only hope to create a similar level. That's the goal, right? That's what I'm doing all this stuff for. All right, so we're assuming that right now we have, so this is an apparel illustration. So we have 3 core colors plus the bleed through color, right? So this white isn't necessarily white. It's whatever there's no color here. So whatever the underlying color, the t-shirt print, the whatever it might be, the bag, the canvas, you know, whatever materials underneath this will fill in that color space. And so we're planning for that. We have our medium blue, our dark blue, which we're using as sort of like our black or our darkest contrast color, our highlight color, and then we have halftones that we're using off of our black. This is what we're using to create these midtones or these gray tones, and kind of cheat a little bit. This is a common tactic for screen printing. It was used a lot for old comic books and such. It's a way to add depth or midtones without adding new colors. So you can also, I could also create midtones, or this is a semi-custom halftone, kind of a dirty halftone, if you will. I could create bursts of this in this blue, in this dark blue, and in this orange, and use those accordingly to sort of add a bigger breadth of color. I'm also using the blob brush tool to create more organic vectors. I really enjoyed the blob brush tool because, you know, there's 2 ways to illustrate in Illustrator using vectors. There's the very, very precise line-based illustrations, as you'll see here, right? I'm using the mathematical lines and shapes to add so this sort of like very kind of strict perfection here in some areas. And then Illustrator's been trying to add more organic vector tools to paint and create organically. And so that's why this vector illustration, which is kind of a combination of both the pen tool and the blob brush, feels more hand-drawn, right? You'll see, obviously I'm using some of these bits and pieces in here to kind of augment that feeling, right? Like the fact that these vectors aren't perfect helps this feel a little bit more handcrafted. And then also because the brush itself isn't perfect. So I can go in here, I'm going to add in some of these mid-tone highlight vectors here. This is a pattern brush. It just adds a little bit of this kind of grit. Which just is so nice. So very, very nice. Right, so I can kind of add this. Some of these places where maybe I don't want like a full hit, but I do want to emphasize that there is some things happening here. Right, we have this sort of this edge lighting that's happening, recognizing that it's there, it exists. This should not be sitting on top of our dark lines, however. This should be sitting in a very specific layer. The same layer that these items are sitting on. And none of this should be sitting on top of any dark colors. So let's change that. All right. I'm gonna add a little bit of edge lighting over here. Now this, I mean, you know, this typically happens if the light source is somewhat behind our object. We're not, I mean, I'm not being, you know, super strict or perfect in my light source here. You know, we're taking a little bit of liberties, and you know, in many cases, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's embellish this a little bit. Let's add a little bit of this here. Let's do the same for this. Make sure that this feels and so again, the smaller that these are, the more gray, the more kind of contrast they add. Right now these are spaced out. You'll notice that I have this that version. If we were to take this and apply it you get a much different feel. Maybe even a better feel. You know, those might be better half tones. And we could stick with a combination too, so that feels a little bit better. I actually want to not move and ruin everything. Let's update that. So that feels like a better grayscale. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I had a third idea here. It got nixed. This was it right here. Gotta come up with something different. back to this other email. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna have to finish this in the morning. Just started 2 a.m. y'all. May. Started 2 a.m. All right, I gotta end